Before we start, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, because this isn't just another story. It's what happens when love, loyalty, and power collide in one breath. Drop your thoughts in the comments, because by the end, you'll need to talk about it. She's not drunk. That's the first lie the room told. Her eyes weren't glazed from champagne, they were clouded by something darker. And the man holding her, the one in the white suit, he knows it. You can see it in his stare. The stillness. The control. That's Lee Jae-Hyun, the youngest Korean CEO to build an empire out of nothing but sleepless nights and sharp instincts. But right now, none of that matters. The empire, the cameras, the murmuring guests behind them, gone. All he sees is her. Nara. The woman who made his heart remember it wasn't made of marble after all. Tonight was supposed to be hers, a celebration of her brilliance, her strategy, her rise. He'd spent weeks planning the launch, making sure every corner of that ballroom reflected her work. He wanted the world to see her the way he did. Fearless, glowing, untouchable. But power is a mirror, and someone always throws stones when they can't stand what it reflects. It started subtle. A toast that lasted too long. A server whose eyes darted to the left after placing her glass. At first, he ignored it. He wanted to trust his people, the company, the order he'd built. But then she laughed. Not her usual laugh, the one that melted stress. This one sounded hollow, offbeat, wrong. And in that instant he knew. Something wasn't right. He moved through the crowd like silence itself. Calm but burning. By the time he reached her, she was losing balance, her body leaning into the wall for mercy. And when her eyes found his, it wasn't embarrassment that flickered there. It was fear, quiet, unfamiliar fear. That's when the switch flipped. The man who could negotiate billion-dollar deals with a smile stopped existing. What remained was something ancient, something primal, the protector, the man in love. He caught her before gravity did, one arm around her waist, the other steadying her trembling hand. The music kept playing. People looked, whispered, speculated. Too much champagne, someone said, too casually, as if explaining away a car crash. He turned his head slightly, scanning faces, memorizing voices, filing them away like data points. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Everyone who mattered could feel the storm gathering behind his silence. Outside the ballroom, the world was quieter. He could smell her perfume, jasmine and rain, but beneath it was something chemical, faint, synthetic. He carried her to the car like she weighed less than the truth he was already chasing. When she stirred, she tried to apologize. He stopped her. "Don't," he said, voice low. "You didn't ruin anything. They did." She blinked up at him, trying to place the word they. He didn't explain. He just brushed a strand of hair from her face and whispered, "I've got you." He didn't take her to the hospital. He didn't trust the hands waiting there. He took her home, his home, and laid her gently on the couch that had never known company before her. He sat there, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled up, watching the rise and fall of her breathing. He should have called security. He should have called the board. He should have called someone. But the only call he made was to himself. A silent vow that when she woke up, the world that hurt her would already be falling apart. He waited until dawn. The skyline of Seoul shimmered like an apology he wasn't ready to accept. He poured himself a coffee he didn't drink and opened his laptop. The calm on his face was terrifying. He started typing, times, faces, small observations that would sound paranoid if spoken out loud but made perfect sense to a man like him. The pattern was there, hiding in plain sight. The event planner who insisted on last-minute staffing changes. The bartender whose name didn't match any payroll record. The executive who avoided eye contact as she staggered out. It was all there, a choreography of betrayal, masked by champagne and applause. Someone had tried to humiliate her, maybe worse. And they did it thinking he would protect the company's image instead of her. They didn't understand what kind of man they'd just tested. When she woke, sunlight spilled across her face. Her first words were a question he already hated. "Did I embarrass you?" He almost laughed. Embarrass him? He wanted to tell her she was the only reason he hadn't burned that ballroom to the ground. Instead, he said softly, "No. You were perfect. And now you're safe." But inside, something else was speaking. The voice of a man cataloging every step, every smirk, every lie that had brought them to this. Love doesn't make a man gentle. It makes him exact. He wasn't going to shout, threaten, or beg. He was going to find out who did it, one heartbeat at a time. The world had always mistaken his calm for weakness. They'd learn soon enough that it was simply the sound of a man preparing for war. He leaned back in the chair, watching her drift back into rest, and whispered to no one, "You picked the wrong woman. You picked the wrong night. You picked the wrong man." And that was the moment Lee Jae-Hyun stopped being just a CEO, and became the storm no one saw coming. When the first rays of morning spilled through the window, the city outside was already alive, oblivious, innocent, loud with routine. Cars honked, vendors shouted, phones rang, and somewhere in that noise the world believed nothing had changed. But inside that apartment, the air was still and heavy. The woman who had carried the company on her shoulders lay wrapped in silence, her skin pale beneath the sunlight, her pulse slow but steady. Lee Jae-Hyun watched her breathe and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. Not the kind that comes with failure or financial ruin, but the quiet, personal fear of losing something sacred. He stood, walked to the window, and stared at his reflection. The man looking back at him didn't look like the boy who once dreamed of boardrooms and power. He looked older, sharper, and angrier. He loosened his tie, picked up his phone, and dialed one number. His assistant, Sang-ho. "I want the event footage, every angle, every second," he said. "And tell IT to unlock the staff logs. Everyone who clocked in last night, I want names before noon." There was no hesitation on the other end, just a short breath. "Yes, sir." He ended the call and turned back to her. She shifted slightly, the blanket slipping off her shoulder. He covered her again. His fingers brushed her hair and lingered there for a moment, feeling the warmth of her skin, the proof that she was still here. He wanted to hold her, but even love had to wait until justice was planned. By 9, his office was awake with fear. His footsteps down the hall sounded different. People felt the change before they saw it. The smile was gone, the small nod he gave employees replaced by something colder. He didn't speak when he entered his office. He didn't need to. The door closed behind him, and the empire braced itself. He sat, opened the laptop, and started with the ballroom cameras. The screen flickered, pixelated images moving in silence. He watched her speech first, her confidence, her grace, the applause that followed. It hurt. Then he fast-forwarded to the moment everything changed. There, the server approaching, the switch, the blink. He rewound it. Watched again. His jaw tightened. There were details only a meticulous man could see. The same server had served one other table that night. Table 6. Table 6 belonged to Director Min-Jae. The name alone tasted bitter. Min-Jae, the man who smiled too much, the one who once said in a meeting, "She's good, but maybe too good." The kind of praise that stabs. Jae-Hyun clicked open another feed. The corridor camera. It showed Nara walking out, her steps uneven, her hand brushing the wall. Then Min-Jae's hand appeared, steadying her. At least, that's how it looked to anyone who didn't know better. But Jae-Hyun knew body language the way most men knew contracts. That hand wasn't guiding her. It was controlling her. Directing her away from the crowd, away from witnesses. His blood chilled. He zoomed in on Min-Jae's face. Calm. Confident. Like someone performing an act they'd rehearsed. Jae-Hyun's voice dropped to a whisper meant only for the empty room. "You touched her." He closed the footage. Picked up his phone. "Security," he said, his tone even. "Bring me the raw data from last night. And tell the finance department to freeze any reimbursements tied to the event team." When he hung up, he opened a new document, titled it simply, "The Night." He started typing. Times. Names. Anomalies. Every movement that didn't belong. His mind worked faster than anger, faster than grief. Logic sharpened his love into something lethal. At noon, Sang-ho entered without knocking. He placed a folder on the desk. Staff logs, sir. There's something else. You asked about the bartender. He wasn't one of ours. He came in through a subcontractor. Temporary placement. Name: Lee Jae-Hyun opened the folder. The signature at the bottom of the contract wasn't Jun's. It was someone else's, someone with authority. He looked closer. Director Min-Jae had signed the approval. That was confirmation, not suspicion. He looked up at his assistant. Get me the bartender's address. Quietly. Do you want security with you? No, he said. If I go alone, people will talk less. He waited until the office thinned out before leaving. The city was loud again. Traffic snarled under a weak winter sun. He drove without music, his thoughts the only noise. When he reached the small bar downtown, it was empty except for one man wiping the counter. Nervous hands, darting eyes. The man looked up and froze. He recognized the face immediately. Everyone in Seoul did. CEO Lee Jae-Hyun smiled faintly, almost kind. Relax. I'm not here to make a scene. He sat on a stool. You poured drinks at my company party last night. I was called in last minute. The manager said they needed. Don't lie, Jae-Hyun interrupted softly. Lying wastes both our time. The bartender swallowed hard. It wasn't my idea. They said it was just a joke, that she'd wake up fine. Who said? The man hesitated. Jae-Hyun slid an envelope across the counter, thick with cash, heavier than the lie about to die. Who paid you? The bartender's hands trembled. Director Min-Jae. He said she was getting too close to the chairman's ear. He said she needed to be reminded of her place. The words hit him like acid. He closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, they were clear again. No rage, just purpose. Write it down. Every word. And keep the money. You'll need it when the truth comes out. The bartender nodded, almost grateful for the chance to survive. Back in his car, Jae-Hyun didn't drive immediately. He just sat there, the city lights reflected in his windshield like broken stars. His hands rested on the steering wheel, calm but ready. He could already see the next moves, the board meeting, the evidence, the fallout. But beneath all the calculation, one thought kept replaying. Nara's laugh before the toast, bright and real. He wanted to hear it again. He wanted her to smile without flinching, to stand in a room and not wonder who wanted her smaller. Love wasn't making him soft. It was making him dangerous in a language the world understood. Results. He drove home that night not as a man going back to someone he cared about, but as a storm returning to its center. When he opened the door, she was awake, sitting on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders. She looked fragile, but her eyes were clear. I thought you'd be at work, she said quietly. I was, he replied, removing his coat. I found something. What? He paused, studied her face and said, the beginning of an ending. She didn't understand yet, but she trusted him. She always had. And for the first time in his life, he realized that trust was heavier than any crown a CEO could wear. He poured her tea, sat beside her, and let the silence stretch until it became comfortable again. Then he whispered, almost to himself, they think they can destroy a woman like you and walk away. They're about to learn that the man who loves you doesn't forgive. He rebuilds after the fire. Outside, the city lights blinked. Inside, the storm was just beginning. The next morning arrived without permission. The city outside was wide awake, but inside his apartment, time felt slower, like the air itself had decided to listen. Nara sat near the window, wrapped in one of his shirts. The light hit her skin softly, like it was afraid to hurt her again. She didn't speak, and neither did he. Words were too fragile for the kind of truth sitting between them. When she finally turned to him, her eyes searched his face. You're different, she said quietly. I found out who did it, he answered. Who? He exhaled once, steady. Min-Jae. Her hand froze halfway to her cup. The same man who congratulated me? The same one who toasted to your future, he said. He paid a bartender to make sure you wouldn't finish your speech. They planned to use that to bury your audit report and pin the department's losses on you. She looked down, shaking her head. All of them knew. Not all, he said. But enough. Silence again. Outside, a bus hissed to a stop. Inside, her breath hitched like a question she couldn't form. What are you going to do? She asked. He looked at her, and for the first time she saw something in his eyes that frightened her, a calm that wasn't peace. I'm going to end it properly. He left before noon. By the time he reached the office, the whole building already knew something was wrong. The assistants looked away. The elevators were too quiet. He walked through the corridor like a verdict with shoes on. At his desk sat a small stack of envelopes, reports, statements, evidence. Everything he needed to tear down a man. He didn't call Min-Jae into his office. He waited. He wanted him to walk in on his own, still believing the world was ordinary. When the door finally opened, Min-Jae came in with that same confident smirk that had once fooled everyone. You wanted to see me, sir? Jae-Hyun didn't answer right away. He slid a flash drive across the table. Play it. Min-Jae hesitated. What's this? Last night. The monitor flickered to life. Footage rolled, the corridor, the hand on her back, the bartender's nervous glance, the text exchange glowing in the dark. The room filled with the faint hum of digital proof. Min-Jae's smirk collapsed in slow motion. I don't understand, he stammered. It's not what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like, Jae-Hyun said. His voice was soft, but there was steel underneath. You thought you could touch her, humiliate her, and still shake my hand on Monday morning. She's not, Min-Jae started, but stopped when he saw Jae-Hyun's eyes. They were too still. You drugged the wrong woman, Jae-Hyun said. And you tested the wrong man. Min-Jae tried to speak again, but the words dissolved. The CEO leaned forward, elbows on the desk. You'll resign. Publicly. You'll admit to falsifying contracts, misallocating event funds, and violating company ethics. I'll give you until sunset. And if I don't, Jae-Hyun smiled without warmth. Then by sunrise, you won't have a company to resign from. Min-Jae left without another word. The door clicked shut, and the office exhaled with him. For a long moment, Jae-Hyun sat there, staring at the frozen image on the monitor. Nara leaning against the wall, his own arm catching her before she fell. He remembered the sound of her breathing that night, slow and frightened. He swore never to let that sound exist again. By afternoon, his instructions had already moved through the company like electricity. Departments paused. Files duplicated themselves onto secured drives. The legal team received quiet orders to prepare statements. HR drafted exit letters for names that hadn't been spoken aloud yet. He didn't raise his voice once. He didn't need to. People who had built their careers on his silence now learned what his silence could do when it decided to move. At home, Nara waited. Every time the elevator chimed, she hoped it was him. When he finally walked in, his expression was unreadable. She stood up, ready to speak, but he stopped her with a look that said, "Not yet." He poured himself water, drank half, and leaned on the counter like a man trying to remember how to exhale. "It's done," he said. She frowned. "Already?" "I don't wait for justice," he replied. "I build it." She approached slowly. "You scare me sometimes." He turned to her, surprised. "Why?" "Because you make revenge sound like mercy." He almost laughed, but it came out as something closer to pain. "I don't want revenge. I want you to walk back into that office and never bow your head again." She reached out, touched his arm. "You can't fix the way they look at me." He covered her hand with his. "No. But I can make sure they look at the ground when you walk in." For the first time since the party, she smiled, a small, tired curve that still managed to light the room. He memorized it. Every war he was about to start would be for that smile. That night he didn't sleep. He sat by her side as she drifted off, his laptop open, emails forming in drafts that sounded more like confessions than orders. Every click of the keyboard was a promise. Every line he wrote was another nail in the coffin of the man who thought power meant immunity. Before dawn, a message arrived on his phone, one sentence from his assistant. The board wants an emergency meeting at 9. Perfect. He looked at Nara one more time, her hair spilling across the pillow like the beginning of peace, and whispered, "When you wake up, the world will look different. And it will all be yours again." Then he stood, buttoned his shirt, and stepped into the morning, ready to finish what the night had started. The morning air was sharp enough to slice thought. He drove without music, the city unfolding ahead of him in long, silver streaks of rain. The board meeting was set for 9, but he arrived at 8:30, the kind of early that isn't eagerness but intent. The receptionist tried to smile. He didn't see her. Every click of his shoes against the marble floor sounded like a countdown. When he entered the boardroom, conversations died mid-sentence. 12 people, 12 faces pretending not to know why he'd called this session. The monitors were already set up. The lights were too bright. He stood at the head of the table and looked at them the way a surgeon looks at a patient before the first incision. "Before we begin," he said, "watch this." The screen flickered alive, the same footage he had shown Min-Jae, but this time it played to an audience that had built their fortunes on pretending ignorance was a skill. There was Nara's laughter, then her glass, then her collapse, then the hand guiding her toward the corridor. The silence that followed was suffocating. "Director Min-Jae has resigned," he continued, voice low. "Effective immediately. You'll all receive the official statement this afternoon. But before that, every one of you will sign a compliance report confirming you had no prior knowledge of the incident." A murmur rose. Someone at the far end cleared his throat. "Sir, the media." "The media will say what I tell them to say," he cut in. "And what they'll hear from me is that a woman was betrayed inside these walls, and that we fixed it." He paused, eyes moving slowly from one director to another. "Completely." No one spoke again. Fear had a sound, and it was silence with breathing in it. He ended the meeting in 15 minutes. By the time he stepped out, legal had already received the files. HR had begun drafting the public announcement. The company's PR officer met his eyes in the hallway and nodded once. She understood. This wasn't damage control. This was purification. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. He stood under the awning for a long moment, letting the city catch up to him. When his phone rang, he knew who it was before he looked. Jae-Hyun. Her voice was soft, hesitant. "Are you all right?" He closed his eyes. Just hearing her steadied him. "I'm fine. It's over." "No," she said. "It's never over when men like that get scared. They'll look for new ways." He smiled faintly. "Then I'll keep finding them." He drove home at noon. She was waiting at the door, barefoot, still in his shirt. The apartment smelled of coffee and rain. When he stepped inside, she searched his face for the answer before asking the question. "Did you destroy him?" "I didn't have to," he said. "I just showed everyone who he really was. The rest happened by itself." She walked closer, stopped inches away. "And what about you? What do you become after something like this?" He wanted to say whole again, but that would have been a lie. "Different," he said instead. "Maybe a little more human." She touched his face, tracing the edge of his jaw with her thumb. "You scare me, Jae-Hyun." He caught her hand gently. "I scare myself." They stood there for a while, breathing the same air, two people trying to remember what peace used to sound like. Then she said, "Tell me it's really finished." He looked at her the way you look at the horizon. Distant, endless. Almost. That night, when the city lights blurred against the windows, he opened his laptop one last time. The final email sat drafted, unsent. It was addressed to the National Audit Office, containing every file Min-Jae had hidden. He hovered over the send button for a long second, then pressed it. Somewhere across town, alarms began in systems that didn't expect to wake tonight. He closed the laptop, exhaled, and walked to where she slept on the couch. He sat beside her, brushing her hair away from her face. The war was almost done, but the quiet after a storm always feels wrong. Too light, too fragile. He whispered to her, maybe to himself, "I told you you'd be safe." She stirred, eyes still closed. "And you," she murmured. "Are you safe now?" He looked out the window at the city that owed him nothing and said softly, "Safety's for people who haven't seen what I've seen. I'll take truth instead." He stayed there until morning, watching the skyline change color, the world rearranging itself around the things he'd broken. In another life, he might have believed that love ends after survival. Now he knew better. Love was the reason you survive at all. The next morning came gently, as if the city itself had decided to apologize. The rain was gone. Sunlight touched everything it had once hidden. Inside the apartment, the air smelled like coffee and second chances. Nara stood on the balcony, one hand resting on the railing, her hair dancing in the light breeze. She looked peaceful, finally, but Jae-Hyun could see it, the question she wasn't asking. He walked up behind her, placed a hand over hers. She didn't move away. "It's quiet today," she said. "For now," he answered. Her eyes searched the skyline. "Do you think they'll come back for you?" "They'll try," he said. "But people who live off lies always choke on the truth eventually." She smiled faintly. "You talk like you're still at war." He looked at her, the corner of his mouth lifting. "Maybe I am. But not with them anymore." She turned to face him. The light hit his eyes, and for the first time since that night, he didn't look haunted. He looked human. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." He shook his head. "Don't thank me. Just win. Build what they tried to take from you. Make them regret ever touching your name." She stepped closer, resting her forehead against his chest. "You sound like a man giving orders again." He chuckled softly. "No. That's just how I say I love you." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world outside kept moving, but inside, time bowed its head in silence. Later that day, he returned to the office. The storm had passed, but every eye that met his held the memory of thunder. The company was quieter, cleaner. People greeted him with forced smiles, pretending loyalty had always been theirs. He didn't bother correcting them. Let them think what they wanted. Let the guilt do its work. In his office, a small envelope waited on his desk. No name, no address, just a seal he recognized. He opened it. Inside was a note written in careful strokes. "You won the battle, but not the war. Some of us were never in the room that night." He stared at the paper for a long while, the faintest shadow of a smile forming. Of course it wasn't over. Men like Min-Jae never act alone. There's always another layer, another secret boardroom waiting in the dark. He folded the letter neatly, slipped it into his drawer, and whispered to himself, "Good. Let them come." That night, when he came home, Nara was already asleep. Her breathing was even, her face calm. He stood in the doorway, watching her, and felt the strange peace that comes right before another storm. He leaned down, kissed her forehead, and murmured, "If they ever try again, they'll learn all over what love can do." The lamp flickered. The city hummed. Somewhere far away, phones buzzed with whispers of his name. The world thought the story had ended. But the thing about men like Lee Jae-Hyun, the ones who build empires and burn them down when someone they love is touched, is that they never really stop. They just get quieter. And quieter is always more dangerous. He sat by the window, the skyline stretching endlessly before him, and smiled to himself, the kind of smile that could mean peace, or a plan. Then, in that low, calm voice that had once silenced entire boardrooms, he said, "Let's see who moves first." If you've stayed till this point, you already know how deep this story runs. Now tell me in the comments, what do you think happened next? Did they finally find peace, or is there something darker waiting in the shadows? If you want to find out what came after this moment, you know what to do. Like this video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and comment below if you want the continuation. Because sometimes, endings are just the calm before the next fire.